GCSE Astronomy Topic 11, Space Probes. Probing space. There are 4 types of space probe that we need to know about. There's a flyby, which doesn't land or orbit, it just flies past, taking lots of measurements and pictures and things. An orbiter goes into orbit around the body, around the planet, for example. An impactor actually collides with the surface, it smashes into the body, it can take lots and lots of measurements on the way down, and then when it crashes there's a big plume of debris, plume of dust and stuff that back on Earth we can look at with telescopes and we learn a lot about the object. And then a lander which actually lands on the body. Now these are the 4 types of space probe, and you need to know an example of each. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ones which are mentioned in the specification. For flyby, it mentions New Horizons, and New Horizons did a flyby of Pluto in 2015, and then it went on to explore some other Kuiper Belt objects. This is the big advantage of flybys, is that you can look at lots of different objects, such as the Voyager missions. They had a good look at several planets, each of them. New Horizons, the very first high quality images of the surface of Pluto. It was the very first time we had a very good look at Pluto. An orbiter, Juno, had a good look at Jupiter in 2016. It went into orbit around Jupiter, and its goal was to understand the origin and evolution of Jupiter. And it took lots of pretty amazing pictures of the surface of Jupiter, and it took measurements of atmosphere and Jupiter's magnetic field as well. An impactor, deep impact, and that smashed into a comet in 2005, and it was the first mission to actually look beneath the surface of a comet. It smashed into the comet, there was a big flash of light, lots of stuff chucked up, and we observed it all back on Earth, took lots and lots of measurements. Evidence of ice and organic materials were found, and there is a big theory suggesting that comets actually brought organic materials to Earth, and from these organic materials life evolved. A lander Philae, European Space Agency, landed on a comet, and I'm just going to call it 67P. It landed on this comet. It was brought there by the Rosetta spacecraft, and then when it got close, this little thing called Philae left, and it landed on the comet and took lots of measurements and things. I remember there being a big problem with the solar panels. I think it landed in a shadow. Eventually we did get lots of good information from it. It took images from the comet's surface and could analyze them directly, the comet's surface, as in it had lots of other instruments on board. Now, manned missions and unmanned missions. What are the advantages of manned missions? Well, humans can cope with situations that robots can't cope with. If you send a robot to somewhere like Mars to wander around Mars, what happens if it comes across something unexpected? Is it going to climb a hill? Is it going to jump across a gap or something? You know, you can have artificial intelligence, but that will never beat a human brain. Humans can cope with situations that robots can't. And because of the time delay, if you go as far as Mars, you can't control these things by remote control. Humans are much more versatile, humans are adaptable, and eventually, if the goal of the human race is to move away from planet Earth and to start colonizing other worlds, you know, starting with the moon and then Mars, then basically manned missions, we have to start getting used to learning how to live in space. Lots of disadvantages of manned missions. Manned missions are much, much more expensive, basically because you need to keep the astronauts alive. You know, people need air and water and food and warmth. Being in space for a long time is not very good for your health. It's not good for your bones. Your bones become very weak. Your muscles become very weak. And also you do get blasted with radiation. Once you move away from the Earth's magnetosphere, you're blasted with solar wind. And you have to worry about bringing people back. Once an unmanned probe has done its job, you can just leave it there. You can't really do that with a manned mission. Not many people would sign up for it if you were going to do that. You're putting human lives at risk, and training astronauts is very expensive, takes a long time. Very famous manned missions, the Apollo program. We need to know a bit about the Apollo program from 1963 to 1972, and its goal was to land humans on the moon and bring them back safely. Here are some key facts about the Apollo missions. Apollos 8 and 10 orbited the moon and then came back, and then Apollos 11, 12, 14, 15, 16 and 17 landed on the moon and returned safely. They brought back lots of moon rock that we could have a jolly good look at on Earth, and they left lots of scientific instruments called alceps were left on the surface of the moon. Apollo 13 was supposed to land on the moon. Watch the film, very good film. It had a few problems. The earlier Apollo flights were basically test flights. Apollo 7 was the first crewed Apollo flight. Apollo 1 never actually took off. There was a tragic accident on the launch pad. They used to fill the command module with pure oxygen, and there was a spark and a fire, and the 3 astronauts died. The total cost at the time was $28 billion. In today's money, that would be $283 billion. So almost $1/3 trillion, the Apollo program. Basically, NASA were given a blank check. They said, I don't care how much it costs, get to the moon. And that's what they did. It was very expensive, though. I've talked about escape velocity in another video, so I'm not going to talk a great deal about it now. The fact is, if you want to go to the moon, then you need big rockets. To approach anything like the Earth's escape velocity, you need big, big rockets, like a Saturn V rocket. Here's some more information about the Apollo missions. There's some fantastic videos you should watch on YouTube, very interesting. There's a massive Saturn V rocket. If you want to get yourself to Cape Canaveral, have a good look at a Saturn V rocket. They are big. At the time, the most powerful machines ever built. There's the Apollo spacecraft, top middle. This is actually carrying people to the moon. Apollo carried 3 people. Before that, it was Gemini, carried 2 people. Attached to the spacecraft is the lander, which is called Eagle, as in the eagle has landed. And if you look at the mission badge, bottom right, you'll see a picture of an eagle. Top right, the command module. This is the only bit that actually got back to Earth with the astronauts in. And it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. It uses the Earth's atmosphere to slow down, using its heat shield, and then the parachutes open up and it splashes down, and the army goes and gets them, or the Navy. Neil Armstrong, the first person to walk on the moon in 1969. The Apollo 15 lunar roving vehicle, the Mars buggy. I know that Apollo 17 had one as well. There's a nice documentary about that on YouTube.